Good evening and welcome back to the weird and wonderful with strange bones. So we've gone around the world quite a bit and we've touched on a number of different countries and brought up ideas of what may or may not be out there that possibly could go bump in the night. And we've been to South America, we've been to Europe, we have been to Africa. And I think it's time, therefore, to consider that we should touch on one of the Asian countries to see what we can find to frighten and fascinate us. And to that end, we are going to have a look at Korea. Now, of course, as we have gone through our varied possible places and things, I think it would be fair to say that we found a number of what you might call commonalities, both in the ghostly realm and in the cryptids. And these commonalities seem, regardless of country or culture, which is quite telling. So, as this is going to be our very first of the Asian countries, it will be interesting to see if there are any other commonalities that we can find in such a distinct and a different culture to the usual. Now, we shall begin with the ghosts, of course. And of course, with the standard disclaimer, hey Abel, welcome, that my pronunciation is not something I will stand by in any manner or form. Hey Herman, hey Klego. Especially with a language as complicated as Korean. So do forgive me if you are a speaker of the language, and if I mangle it terribly, I think it's something you can probably expect. Nevertheless, let us begin. Now, the interesting thing is, when it comes to a ghost in Korea, there's a fairly specific view as to what a ghost is, which we haven't necessarily encountered prior to. And that is to say that they are specifically the spirits of the deceased who have not yet fulfilled their life's purpose, and as such are therefore cursed to roam the earth. Looking at ghosts we have seen in the past, it does make you wonder a bit about what the life purpose might be of some of the ones we have encountered. But let us have a look at what kind of ghosts that we can find. Now, there are a number of distinct types of ghosts in the Korean view of such things. Welcome to Ramfilane and the Pink Penguin. Do feel free to comment and such as we go along. So the first of the Korean ghosts is called a Cheonyao Guisin, which is specifically a virgin ghost, usually in white mourning clothes, called a sobok, with long hair symbolizing her unmarried status. um, believed to have died without fulfilling her Confucian duty of obedience to her father, husband, and children. Now, it's interesting to note that while in most of the world, black is the color associated with mourning and sadness, in many of the Asian countries, it's in fact white. So the fact that she is dressed in white indicates the mourning. The second kind of ghost is the male equivalent of the first, which is the Chonga Gwisin, sometimes called the Mongdai Gwisin, which is a bachelor ghost who assumedly has also failed in their Confucian duty. Then you get the Mulgwishin, which is a water ghost born from those people who have drowned. The Dalgyal Gwisin, which is an egg-shaped ghost with neither features or origin believed to cause death if seen. The Oriongaksi, which is a helpful ghost which lives in a scallop shell, and the Arang, the ghost of a young woman who was unjustly killed and seeks justice, often appearing as a white lady. Now, very interestingly, of course, that seems to fit the white ladies encountered in other places um, in certain respects, so we may come back to that one. And then added to the list are a number of cryptids which we will get to later on in the discussion rather than right now, because there's quite a lot and it is a very interesting setup. But while we are on it, let's look at a few of the better known ghosts, shall we say. Now, the first one that turns up is a more modern ghost, which apparently appears on the Jayuro motorway. And this is a motorway that links Seoul to Paju in the Gyeonggi province. And it's known as a place where eerie encounters occur. In this specific instance, um, it is a woman that appears in the middle of the road late at night, seemingly wearing sunglasses, but if you get closer, you find that they are not sunglasses at all, but black voids instead of eyes. Public interest peaked in this particular one when a number of celebrities shared their experience of encountering this woman. And some say that she is a ghost trying to get somewhere that wants to be picked up and taken there. At one point, even an exorcist was brought in to explain the phenomenon, and they said that it was the spirit of a young woman murdered nearby, though no further information was truly given in that regard, which I think is quite interesting. But we, of course, have several ghosts that have been seen on roads that one lifts. Haunted hitchhikers are absolutely something that is common. So there's another one that fits to a known role. Hey, Dane, welcome, welcome. Another one that turned up also in a modern setting in the late 80s and early 90s, which has become something of an urban legend, which is referred to for some reason as the Hong Kong Grandma. And apparently, legend has it that An elderly woman traveling from Korea to Hong Kong perished in a plane crash and in her final moments inexplicably merged with her beloved cat, transforming her into a half-human, half-cat ghost. This ghastly entity is rumored to stalk the night, preying especially on unsuspecting children that she kidnaps and murders. Her feline attributes grant her extreme agility, making escape almost impossible, as she can move very quickly and leap effortlessly. And the combination of this feral evil creature and the seemingly harmless grandmother figure um, that nevertheless has these supernatural and predatory abilities adds a certain spine-chilling dimension to this urban legend. Now, what's very interesting about it, of course, to add to that, is the fact that many of the female evil type ghosts seem to have a predilection in some way or another, hey RKM, um, for hunting children. It seems that children are a target in many cases, which I find to be quite an interesting um, commonality that we've seen in other countries. Now, the Chuenyo Guishin, the virgin ghosts, um, are apparently quite a common story to be found, particularly in South Korea, and are very much from that wonderful movie we enjoyed so much, The Ring, which is a female with long black hair, often obscuring their faces and possibly possessing, should you actually see them, very unsettling faces. These ghosts are associated with sudden and significant temperature drops. That's another thing that we have absolutely encountered on many occasions. Seems to be a commonality with ghosts and such like. Something which I think we very much do need explained in some way. Hey, Unix. But they seem to have more an environmental effect than they are generally physically dangerous. But that isn't always the case, dependent on which story you go through. Now, when we're talking frightening places, as we have discovered so far, very often it is the case that it is not a graveyard that you will find a ghost at all, but rather the place where the person has died. And one of the most famous haunted places in South Korea is the Pohang Hospital. Now, during the Korean War, the hospital was established, and it carries with it a rather somber and tragic history that they say has left an indelible mark on the premises. Over the years, there have been multiple reports of paranormal activities contributing to its reputation as a place where the echoes of the past persist. Both staff and visitors of the hospital have often said that they have unsettling encounters. Hey there, Vishal. They say that strange noises, cold spots, and feelings absolutely occur, and on occasion, ghostly apparitions are seen walking up and down the corridors. The prevalent belief among many is that the souls of the patients, especially the soldiers who died in the hospital during the war, have become trapped within the walls of the hospital and can never leave. So, absolutely fits to a lot of the common views around the world of ghosts that we have encountered thus far, and adds to the interesting setup. Now, the next one, which I think perhaps has a double level of creepy, um, as we have found in other places, is another hospital, but this particular one is a psychiatric hospital, the Gonjam Psychiatric Hospital. And of course, um, anywhere where there is madness, we can almost certainly say there's going to be something strange and twisted. And this particular hospital is on the outskirts of Seoul, and it has gained infamy as a haunted location since it was abandoned in the 1990s. The structure is now much run down and deteriorated, and according to the legends, at least, um, there was a fair amount of mistreatment of the patients when it was open. So it's definitely a fertile ground for where a ghost might develop. And of course, as a result, ghost hunters, thrill seekers, and the like have gone in to check out and examine this amazing place. And they report disembodied voices and strange cold spots. And again, something which we have encountered in many such places, the not only apparitions of things, but shadow creatures as well. It is said that this particular place is quite desolate and eerie just in and of itself, which adds to its terrifyingly haunted environ. There are people who have said that if you go there, there is a chance that things will follow you home. So perhaps there is more than just the dead, or perhaps those who are mad have never left. Another one, and again, right in line with all that we have seen thus far, hey Sarah, um, is another hospital, Bangkok Village Hospital, which is in the port city of Busan. Um, it was a fairly well established medical complex that, um, for some reason, was left deserted in the 2000s, leaving a maze of dilapidated buildings and, as they say, lingering memories. It's another one of the favorite for ghost hunters, where it is said that in the deserted corridors, echoing footsteps and unexplained cries of pain pierce the silence. They say that the past patients are still there, roaming the hallways and the grounds around. And if you go to this particular hospital, you're almost guaranteed to see something that will chill you to the bone. Hey there, Kerry. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Um, I'm going to give you an advite just in case you'd like to join us on the live. You don't need to feel you must if you don't want to, but you are very, very welcome. Um, hey to all you guys that are joining, Gojo and Waris. So we're doing Korea, ghosts and cryptids, to see what we can find. So as we go through the Korean ghosts, we see that there are a number of places, many of them quite modern, where absolutely we can see all kinds of strange and twisted creatures. But that is not all that we find in Korea. Um, Now we're moving a little bit onto what we can say are the cryptid side of things. And the first one up is a very interesting one, because if you've been following me for a little bit, you will know very well that in South Africa we have the Tokolosh, and in Cote d'Ivoire we had a small, hairy humanoid that was neither animal nor man. And right alongside that, there is the Korean dokaibi, which are a kind of goblin-like creature, much in the line of what we've encountered in other countries, and they are considered to be a kind of nature spirit in some way with mysterious powers. But of course, we can't go into the Asian countries in any manner or form without mention of the Guemigo, which, as we know from Japan, we would call the kitsune, the nine-tailed fox, depicted as a beautiful woman or shapeshifter that can sometimes be friendly, sometimes be tricksy, and sometimes be downright cruel. There is, of course, also many others more specific, such as their agi, which is a kind of hungry demon, generally associated with gluttony, and that, of course, fits in with many views of demons also in the Western world that says that demons are specific to certain sins and vices and will try to catch you or attack you through those vices. So there's a commonality right there. Now, an interesting thing about Korea is that they have very much a strong culture of appreciation of the ancestors and of spirits in general. And Korean shamanism um, is a strong part of the culture where you deal with and appease the varying spirits and ghosts. So, absolutely, um, it's something that we see in several other cultures. It's very strong in Africa that the shaman is the intermediary to deal with the important ancestors and such that are important. So, certainly, that at least we do need to consider as a point to keep in mind while looking at the ghostly things um, in Korea. The fact that the culture itself has got a positive attitude towards, which is not always mirrored. In many places around the world, ghosts are considered bad and to be avoided. So, um, hmm, we shall have to take that in and as we can, as it were. Um, but that alone is not sufficient. So let's move on with a few more of Korean things of terror and such. Now, the Korean War is one of those events that was very important in the history of Korea and caused a lot of trauma. Um, but touching on that kind of thing and on the war, we know that it left behind what we can call um, remnants or ghosts that absolutely need to be considered and attended to. So the historical ghosts, such as the Cheon the virgin ghost, um, in the Korean culture, it's very important that you obey your cultural requirements, that you fit to your particular place in society. So it's not surprising that when somebody doesn't, they're considered to be forced to be um, punished in that way. So these ghosts are said to roam the world because of their failures, and as a result, they attempt to possess specifically young girls to try to fulfill whatever their aims or desires are that they could not do in life. And as a result, um, it was a common thing to hold what they would call a ghost wedding, where the ghost would be married to a ghost of a young man in a ritual ceremony, which would then force him to no longer be a maiden ghost and therefore stop haunting, which is an interesting thing. The other ghost, which I do want to just touch on briefly, is the rather strange egg ghost. I've never encountered this before, even in stories. Um, and they may possibly be the ghosts um, that somehow never received a memorial service or proper rites in some way. Um, but they are interesting in that with neither arms nor legs nor face, they float around, they can kill you, but most importantly, they can steal your face and therefore somehow gain the ability to move on in life, leaving you as the next egg ghost. It's a very strange sort of um, view of a ghost. So I'm not really sure how that fits into the whole uh, ghostly heritage as such. But nevertheless, moving on a bit, we're going to look at the Mulgwishin, which I found very interesting in that we saw this in Cote d'Ivoire, that they say there are a number of ghosts, or at least some kind of spirit, um, tied to waterfalls and such in the country. And in this particular instance here, water ghosts are born from the accidental deaths of people by drowning that live in both ponds and in the sea. So they have to be from a water death. And I'm not really sure why they would specifically make a point that this is different to any other ghost, but they do. Um, and it's said that there is a possibility they could somehow trick you or draw you into the water and cause you to drown too. Um, so, absolutely, there is that. Another interesting um, so, shall we call it a spirit more than anything? It's not really a ghost, but it's one which I find is fascinating. Um, and it is specifically a ghost found only in the outhouse. Now, outhouses are isolated in dark places, separated from the main house, um, and for some reason, they're considered to be scary places where unusual events occur. Now, I'm not entirely sure why, and I'm not certain why it's specifically a cultural thing. So, if anyone knows, do let me know. But if anything strange happens, people often will immediately say that it is the ghost of the outhouse, which is a very strange little quirk to a haunting. Another one which shows perhaps the strength of importance to family life and such, and which ties into a certain degree to the idea of lost ghosts. And that's what they call the wayfarer ghost, a haunted spirit that is a person who died too far from home um, before they could live out their proper life. And these spirits are said to be trapped between the living and the dead, and very specifically, they will haunt and terrorize their family, which is quite a sad way round of things going, I suppose. But we do have plenty more of such things that can horrify and terrify you in Korea. I find it most interesting in this specific incident that we have encountered a couple of the both cryptids and ghosts that are in common with the view of things around the world that we've encountered thus far. So the idea of the shadow people, this is turned up in African culture. This is turned up in Mexican culture. This is turned up in South Africa, in Wales, in England, and in Portugal as well. So it seems that shadow people, and each incident is described in very much the same way. It seems these are common around the world, regardless of race, religion, or country. I find it very interesting as well that we have the short and hairy Bigfoot-like creature, except without necessarily the big feet. In Africa, they all seem to be short, goblin-like, and in Korea as well, which is interesting, unlike in a number of the other countries where they're much bigger. So it seems that we have common cryptids, we have common ghosts, and absolutely the tragic and the violent deaths seem to cause ghosts yet again. It's when the people have failed in some way or died unfulfilled and therefore tragically haven't completed their life in some way, tragically, or if violence was involved, such as in the war. So definitely commonalities in Korea that we find in the ghosts, definitely commonalities that we find in the cryptids for some reason. Of course, along with the main and more famous cryptids, there are a whole collection of lesser cryptids, including dragon-like creatures and more, which we would expect for the Asian cultures. It seems to be a common theme there, absolutely, and it is. But the explanations that are given for the older stories, at least, are that they are ways to reflect societal fears, values, and beliefs, and are cautionary tales. But they add the note that they are also there to explain the unexplained. And I think that's true absolutely throughout the world when it comes to the supernatural. We absolutely do tend to use these stories to warn. However, as we see with a number of the urban legends, um, it's not entirely all about explanations or cautionary tales, as it is about the fact that people went there and discovered these things while visiting or whatever, and the net result was something truly terrifying. Now, amongst other strange things that are there. They have their own version of the Grim Reaper, which I think is an interesting thing. The description of this character known as Zhao Shungzhaja is that he is a pale complexioned man. He is known as, I suppose, the equivalent of the angel of death, and his job is to guide the souls of the departed to the afterlife. He's known to be wearing a black mourning robe and traditional hat. But in modern stories, the clothing is often changed to black suits, which of course is just a modernization of the same. But nevertheless, it's interesting that there is a specific person of the dead, if you would, just as we have in Western society with the Grim Reaper. Hey, Mary. Herja. Now, not all ghosts are bad, and that I find very interesting. And one of these somewhat ghostly or cryptid-like spirits is actually a warm-hearted and decent personage. And according to the legend, there was a young farmer, unmarried, who lived alone, who found a scallop shell beside his fields, and he brought it home. And during the days that followed, a young girl emerged from the shell and took over the running of the house. Once the farmer discovers this, she reveals to him she is actually the daughter of the Dragon King, who is being punished for entering the human realm. But while she is there, she looks after him and looks after his home, and is actually a very sweet and kind and helpful spirit. It's kind of nice to occasionally encounter something that isn't quite as dark and terrifying as you ordinarily encounter in most of these stories. As we go through them, we find that they also have a number which, if you're into Dungeons and Dragons and the like, you have probably encountered, because the next sort of spirit cryptid creature you will find in Korea is the Yuinstru, which is quite literally a mimic. It is a tentacled creature that can shapeshift into forms that allow it to hide, with a strong intellect and a fondness for playing with its food, and which is said to be telepathic. And I think that describes the mimics of Dungeons and Dragons very, very well indeed. And I think it almost certain that that's where they got the idea from. So it is in fact from a genuine culture's folklore. Another rather interesting one which we have not encountered before is the Bulgasari, which is a creature whose name means unkillable, and it's depicted as a monster with a bear-like body and an elephant's trunk, which was said to be completely unkillable and which would hunt people down, which I think is a suitably horrifying thing to find. Hey there, Reagan. Now, the next creature that we have is one which we have encountered in almost every country so far, and we can consider this to be a story that could very well come from remnants of the dinosaurs, and this is the Lake Tianchi monster, which lives in the Lake Tianchi, at the peak of the Baekdu mountain. There is a volcanic crater there, which was at one stage shared by both China and North Korea. And they say that there is a large, somewhat dinosaur-like creature that lives in this particular place, which fits to many of the dinosaur-like monsters that we've seen, such as the Loch Ness Monster, and so on and so forth. So that's a very interesting. Thank you, Era. Glad you could join us. I'm going to do an invite to you guys quickly. If you would like to join, feel free to join me on this chat. Though, of course, if you don't want to, you do not have to, but you are welcome to. So as we are wandering through the strange and twisted of these creatures, what do you think? There are certainly a number of the mimics, shall we call them, and such of the cryptids that definitely are unique to at least the Asian cultures, like the kitsune, for example, which we don't have an analog for in the Western or African world. But nevertheless, there are a number, especially among the ghosts, which seem to be particularly common, no matter the culture. And this brings us back to our discussion again of um, the shadow people. And there is a particular country that I have been saving that has a whole lot of lore on the shadow people, which I will be doing in the future. I've been saving it a bit because I wanted to see how many other countries had some kind of similar story, just to see if we could find that. Now, so far, the most important explanation for shadow people that we've encountered does in fact come from Islam, and in their explanation of the jinn. Hey there, Banana Man. Welcome, welcome. But Bruno Maria, welcome, welcome. In saying that, can we say that shadow people are in fact not necessarily ghosts, but some kind of other living being that shares our planet with us? Because it seems in many cultures the answer to that would be yes. And an explanation for it that almost parallels that we will find when we get to the full dive into shadow creatures or shadow people. But I really do want to hear from you guys. Give your comments. Type a comment if you have an opinion or an idea about it. You would be very welcome. Hey, Rene Ganoff. You'd be very welcome to give your opinion on these things. But I almost want to classify them neither as cryptids nor as ghosts. They certainly don't fall into the category of a culture's gods or deities in any way. So there is that. It's something which I find to be strange in its uniqueness and in the fact that it's found in so many different countries and cultures. That to me says a lot. We could possibly find, at least due to the fact that we are all human, there might be a certain amount of reason that we see many similarities in the stories of ghosts, at least. But I don't know when it comes to the shadow people. That being the case, we've covered all the major particular ones for Korea, which I think has given us a fair understanding in many ways of what sort of supernatural and paranormal we can expect. But I do want to touch on a couple of other things that perhaps may or may not be of interest, if you will. In Korea, there is no native mythology at all of vampires. Maybe that's a good reason to visit Korea, if they have none at all. And in fact, when it comes to the undead, besides ghosts, they don't seem to have any real undead at all in their traditional mythology. In the modern age, of course, that's not the case at all, because you will find that modern TV and movies like Twilight and such have gained a fair bit of popularity, and as a result, there are now crossovers from other cultures, such as the Western vampire, the Jiangxi, which is Chinese, of course, which is a zombie-like creature. And of course, we have not gone to China at all yet. So, any stories in that regard just don't exist in the culture. But here is a point which was brought up by somebody on Reddit, actually, which I found to be absolutely fascinating. Korea, and in fact India as well, are huge growers and suppliers of garlic. And perhaps that's the reason why it's impossible for vampires to be in Korea. So that's an interesting little fact that may have something to do with it. If the country is so big on its production of garlic, and if it is eaten so much by the public, perhaps vampires simply cannot exist there. So take that as you will. I don't really know what else to say about that. Now, the last point that I would like to touch on is whether or not there is a specific point in the Korean culture in terms of shadow people, because obviously that is what I would say is quite the biggest of the groups that we are encountering, besides particular cryptids or ghosts, pure ghosts. Now, in the Korean culture, what they refer to as shadow people are particularly those that are seeing a shadowy figure that you only see out of the corner of your eye, and if you try to look directly at it, it's simply not there. So they don't directly speak of shadow people as other places do, though modern ghost hunters have said they have seen such things, which they've described as shadow people. So perhaps there is, and it's not simply explained away as an ordinary ghost, or guishin as they are called, because the actual term guishin, though it means a ghost, it doesn't necessarily only mean a ghost, and it can sometimes refer to other kinds of spirits and even deities as well. They do note that their ghosts are only formed by the death of a human being, which implies that you don't get ghosts of animals, which seems to be a almost common thing around the world. There are obviously one or two exceptions to this, and they are very, very specific in terms of location for ghosts. So without a doubt, there is that. And of course, they do say that their ghosts can be dangerous, which was a question that has come up several times in past areas we've discussed. That yes, ghosts can seem to harm you, or at least affect you physically in some way. Now, one of the things which is quite interesting is in modern Korea, there is a game called the elevator game. And they say it's just an urban legend, but then there are those who say that it isn't. And it's a version of the mirror game, which is also played, where you get into an elevator and you call out to the ghosts of any who have died where the elevator is. And as the doors close, they will join you in the elevator. This is a modern version of the mirror game that is played, which says that if at night you use a mirror, and how exactly there are varying stories, but you use the mirror and call out to the ghosts to join you, they will do so. Whether or not they will, I suppose you would simply have to try it out yourself. But mirrors turn up in terms of the supernatural and paranormal in many different cultures. So it seems that mirrors are absolutely something that you may or may not want to play with in terms of ghosts. An interesting thing which has been added, and it attests back to a question that was raised as well, is if you visit a haunted place, is it possible that the ghost or spirit can attach to you and come back with you? Well, in the Korean belief, ghosts can enter your home through physical objects. So if you were to get an item of clothing that was connected in some way to someone who died and who is now a ghost, and you take it home, it's absolutely possible that the ghost can come too, which is why perhaps you should never get clothing or items from those who have died. It makes second-hand clothing shopping terrifying on a whole new level. Absolutely isolated places, this is common in all cultures, and perhaps is more a psychological thing and says something about us as people rather than it does about ghosts in general. So there is that. And there is a strong feeling which certainly has some echoes that when a ghost is formed, their particular people that they will haunt are going to be their own descendants more than anybody else. So Maybe, and yet again, maybe not. But there you have it. The ghosts and cryptids of import of Korea. Now, having touched on an Asian uh, country specifically, I think that it stands to reason that we should then move again to a completely different culture if we can. And one of the interesting points that were made was that two countries that supposedly have absolutely no legends whatsoever of vampires are Korea and India. And it is an interesting fact that not only is garlic a majorly produced crop in Korea, but it is also a majorly produced crop in India. And given that neither of these countries have legends of vampires specifically, perhaps that is a reason that these creatures do not exist in these cultures. So, if you are ever worried in particular about vampires, maybe if you plant yourself a small plot in the garden, your home will be safe. Who knows? Or just add it to your diet. So, there is that. But we have absolutely discovered yet again um, the general view of how ghosts are made and what kind of ghosts you can get and where they appear seems to be consistent in Korea as much as it was in Mexico, Portugal, South Africa, Wales, and Cote d'Ivoire. And despite the fact that these places are so different and the cultures are so different, um, ghosts remain consistent. Um, a little bit thin on the ground on explanation for the shadow people, sadly. But as I say, we will be following those on more and more as we go along. Um, but definitely some very interesting cryptids, I think. And we've also seen the first of our cryptid stories where it's not only creatures, if you will, that can become supernatural or paranormal creatures, um, but objects as well. The mimic creature that we encountered often appears as ordinary and everyday items around the house to hide itself. So, this is something that, in my experience at least, is almost exclusive to the Asian cultures. I haven't encountered inanimate objects as supernatural cryptids in other cultures around the world. So maybe we will find something as we go along, but I think not. It's not a known or big thing, at least. Let us say that. So absolutely an interesting setup in that regard, and one that we do need to take further, which we will do. But for the future, I think that uh, it is time to end off with Korea. And I think in the future, unless somebody sends me a message with a particular preference or anything like that, or something fascinating to talk about, I do feel that we need to go to one of the provinces in India next, because that again is a very different and interesting culture, and one we have not yet even touched on slightly. And as we know, they have a lot of interesting history, and the advantage there is it has been a recorded history in many ways for a very, very long time, which I think will give us rich fodder for discussion. But yes, again, those of you who have joined me, thank you. Like, subscribe, join me on the live if you can. You are more than welcome, and I would absolutely love to have you to give your views and opinions, whatever they may be, as we explore the weird and the wonderful with me, Strange Bones, from out here in South Africa in the Drakensberg Mountains, the Dragon Mountains. So, thank you very much for this, and thank you for joining me on this journey in search of the strange. Have a wonderful evening, and I will see you on the morrow.